Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's HIStalk webinar. I'm Lori from HIStalk and I'll be moderating. In today's webinar, Jen from HIStalk will interview Regina Holliday. Some people call Regina the Rosa Parks of healthcare. She's an activist, artist, speaker, and author. She's also a mother and a widow. Today we'll hear what she's been doing recently and what the future has in store for her. I have just a couple housekeeping items to make you aware of before we start. Attendee phone lines have been muted to prevent background noise. You can use GoToWebinar's questions box in the console to submit questions to Regina at any time. She'll answer your questions during Q&A at the end. You can use the questions box or the chat function to communicate with me if you have any issues during the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll receive links to the recording and a PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation in a follow-up email. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Lori. Regina, hi, welcome.
Hi, it's great to talk with you again, Jen.
Yeah, it's great to see you. It was great having you at our HIMSS booth in Chicago a few weeks ago. The live walking gallery paintings definitely drew people in, and I think it gave you a great opportunity to educate attendees about the gallery and the role patient advocates play at such large conferences. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how patient advocacy has evolved over the last several years. How have you seen it grow and change in its efficacy?
Well, it's been an amazing 5 years that I've been working in patient advocacy. I know people have been in it far longer than I, but it's been really exciting to see how many individuals who were separated, they were in disease communities and focused on one part of healthcare, have now, because of social media, started integrating and sharing stories and sharing networks and power, and it's been an amazing time for patients. And through that, we're changing policy much more rapidly than we could do in the past.
I can't explain to people the power that Twitter has when it comes to patient advocacy, so I love hearing you tie in social networking to the evolution. You know, we were happy to work with you to support patient advocates at HIMSS this year. And I'd love to kind of pick your brain. What kind of advice do you have for patient advocates when they attend conferences like HIMSS or Health 2.0? What sort of tips and best practices do you have for folks who kind of want to get in and disrupt things a little bit?
Oh, golly. So the major thing that oftentimes it's challenging to get to attend conferences as a patient. So the first thing is getting in that door, and that can be a bit of a challenge. I do recommend start reaching out to organizations if you know a meeting is coming up, and often resources online like Simpler can be a great resource to follow the conversations to figure out, you know, what conferences are upcoming. You can reach out directly to conferences and ask if you can attend and hopefully present. And one of the things you can mention is the Patients Included movement, which is both a movement and it's a symbol that can be on your web page for your conference that has a check on a black box that says Patients Included. And that means that patients were in the audience and patients helped design it and patients were speaking on the podium. And that can be a really great thing to talk to people about. It's like, hey, you want to be part of this movement, you want to be inclusive, invite me, I can help you become inclusive. So that's one element. The other is considering how expensive it is to attend a conference. You know, reaching out and partnering with others to be able to afford attendance. Sometimes the conference will pay. They'll pay for your travel and lodging. Sometimes they'll pay an honorarium for your speech, but sometimes that's not an option. So it can be where you're trying to find scholarship dollars. I have done a lot of fundraising with the Society for Participatory Medicine to create a travel fund that we're, you know, consistently soliciting to get money into so that patients can put a query in to the society and say, hey, I'd like to go to this conference. This is what I plan to do at this conference. Can you help me cover the travel budget? And societies try to help quite a few people attend different conferences using that model. Then there's great folks like you, right, that wonderfully offered 5 patient travel scholarships to go to HIMSS, which was spectacular. It really helped a whole bunch of people out. So that's, you know, showing the fact that we can make these partnerships happen and get patients through the door. Then there's the walking gallery, which I started, which is the paintings on jackets. And that, one of the things that's been amazing about it is now conferences are wanting to host gatherings at the walking gallery. And one of my requirements, if they host a gathering, is they have to be willing to invite any local walker to the event for free.
Okay.
So that gets people indoors of events that often cost thousands of dollars to attend, and they get in as a member of the walking gallery.
Do you want to take a quick second and explain what you're painting on the jacket that we're seeing right now?
Oh, in the on the slide deck that you see?
Yeah.
So that's my primary jacket within the walking gallery. It's called Little Miss A-Type Personality. And it's called that because when my husband was sick in the hospital and I was asking questions about his care and his treatment and his diagnosis, the oncologist in charge of my husband called me Little Miss A-Type Personality for asking questions. So I took that as a kind of scarlet letter, and I painted the world around it on my back. So it's a very unique painting within the gallery. It's done in a very different style than almost every other jacket. And that style of painting is called painting in negative space.
Okay.
I didn't paint an A, I painted the world around the A. And I wanted to use painting itself as a symbolism to what I was doing. Painting in negative space, hence I am taking a negative and turning it into a positive. So we had a very, very bad experience. And rather than fall into despair or into the world of lawsuits, which is a very sad place to be, I decided to go in a really positive way, which was, let's change healthcare and make it better for us all.
Great, great. So you've mentioned a number of resources that patient advocates can take advantage of to get involved in conferences like HIMSS. What do you think are the most pressing agenda items for patient advocates right now? What's next on your calendar as far as patient advocacy events go?
Well, there's this really big thing that happened at HIMSS.
Tell us.
So right before HIMSS, an announcement came out from CMS that a measure within meaningful use, stage 2, that said that 5% of patients should be able to view, download, or transmit their data using their patient portal. Well, they wouldn't have to do that in the proposed regulations because the facilities came back with the concept that it was too hard. One, it was too hard to do this, and two, patients weren't really interested anyway. So CMS came back with the proposal of what if one patient does it in the reporting period? And those of us in patients' rights were outraged because one patient could be a staff person who happens to be treated at a facility. That would be one patient. And we felt it went against the entire concept of meaningful use to make it where it's not meaningful to patients. So we began a movement right at HIMSS immediately that was to try to get access to information and change the regulation back to a 5% protocol. And so there's now a federal comment that you can comment on before June 15th, stating that you think it's a really good idea for patients to be able to get in and get that information, and it's got to be a minimum of 5%. There's a petition that Peter Levin and Farzad and several others put forward that says that you want your data, and it's my data, and would you like to be part of a bigger movement to make that happen? Cascadia or Sherry Reynolds, she also put a change the order petition out there about the same kind of concept. I'm organizing a protest painting event in the Health and Human Services on May 20th.
Okay.
Yeah, so it should be really cool. So I will be out there painting with several of the individuals I know. Hopefully security won't boot us. But we wanted to be out there painting about blue buttons, painting about data, showing folks that, yes, actually patients do want this information.
So can anyone in the patient engagement community or even those who may be outside of it at this point come out and support you, and how can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's welcome.
Okay.
That's part of the goal within my movement and advocacy is that everyone is welcome at the table. Everyone has a voice. Everyone is valuable. No one should be left behind.
Right, right. And I assume you're going to be, I know you've written about it on your medical advocacy blog. I assume you'll be tweeting, taking pictures, recapping it.
Yep, and Ted from Kaiser will be taking photos. He's coming down during it. And we have at least one reporter who's supposed to show up, as well as, you know, artists and other individuals who are like-minded who want to be out there. Right, right. And prepping for the interview, you also mentioned that you're going to be at Health Datapalooza, Cinder Blocks 2, and Awesome Con. I am a big fan of Comic-Con, Dragon Con. Yay!
So tell us a little bit about those events and how patient advocates can get involved in those particular events and how maybe those events have catered a little bit more to patient advocates over the last several years?
Okay, so this is a busy time for me. On top of doing the painting protest on May 20th, I'll be going back to DC for AwesomeCon, May 29th through 31st. And that is expected a minimum of 50,000 attendees.
Wow.
Bigger than HIMSS. And those are really passionate people because most of them are cosplayers as well. So you want the cosplayers on your side. You know, anybody who's willing to dress up and make themselves potentially look like a fool on a regular basis for what they believe in, that's what you want on your side, right? And so I will be there in a booth sponsored by Kaiser Permanente.
Okay.
I worked with them last year going to Baltimore for Artscape. And we have this gorgeous big banner that says Kaiser Permanente and the Walking Gallery. And so I own that banner. They gave it to me afterwards. And when I saw AwesomeCon was coming, I said, hey, want to team with me again?
Mm-hmm.
So they paid for the booth. And I will be in the booth painting. And this is one of the events I live paint at.
Okay.
So there will be a bunch of jackets prepped and ready in the booth. And individuals in the exhibition floor will come up to us and say they would like to join the walking gallery. And if they want, they can stand there and tell their story while we live paint for them.
Wow.
Yeah, it'll be amazing. So we're very excited about this. As you see on the slide deck right now, I forwarded to a slide of myself in the TARDIS from HIMSS. One of the booths had a TARDIS on the sales floor.
Okay.
So, because science fiction and the future, I mean, people who follow science fiction and all of these stories, these amazing arts, see, they're the kind of people we want to talk to because we're talking about tech. And people who follow science fiction, they're already mentally in the right place. They've been in the right place for 20 years. Technology's actually caught up with their worldview.
Okay.
So they're powerful evangelists for our cause. And I'm really excited to get to spend time with them. So that will be happening in DC at the end of May. Then right after there's Health Datapalooza, and I'm not really attending Health Datapalooza. I will be going to it to pick people up at the end of it.
Okay.
So I chartered a bus that's going to go to Health Datapalooza, and we're going to pick attendees up after their event's pretty much over. And we will drive them for 3 hours, the mountains of Western Maryland, where I am doing a conference called Cinder Blocks 2, because this is my second patient-run conference that I've organized. And I call it Cinder Blocks because when I was in 5th grade, we didn't have any bookshelves.
Okay.
And what we did is my teacher had us walk to the local lumber yard and pick up 2x4s and cinder blocks and bring them back to our class, and we built our own bookshelves.
Okay.
Which is powerful and amazing and works, but it's not necessarily beautiful.
Right.
So I use cinder blocks as a hashtag to remind folks we are building this, and it may not be glossy and it may not be a 4-star hotel, but what it will be is passionate and world-changing.
Great, great. So let's talk a little bit, let's go back to meaningful use and working with providers. You've obviously got a great relationship with Kaiser Permanente. I'm wondering if you can go into what you think the provider business case is for getting patients more involved in their own care, since vendor technology changes won't happen unless customers demand it.
I mean, of course Kaiser gets it, because they've been a wellness model for a while now. They want people to not get sicker. So as we go deeper into value-based purchasing, things start changing, right? So a fee-for-service model, it sort of made sense to make people in the dark and not know what was going on, because then you could do a whole bunch of tests that were basically unnecessary. Or you can't even get to the test, so therefore we have to do it again because we can't get to the results. That doesn't work in a streamlined system, because you don't make more money if you do additional testing. So individual, organizations like Kaiser, which is the insurer and is the provider, they don't want that. They want healthy clients because they are the insurer and the provider. So they're more into workflow. They're more into utilizing technology like portals, and they have been for a number of years, and they have the data sets to prove that it works. Now, what's challenging is when you leave the Kaiser kind of formula and you go into the regular world and trying to make that work. Now, ACOs, of course, is part of what's trying to address this, but even small practices are figuring out that, honestly, if you give people information, they're going to be able to be part of their care and a team member much more easily than if you just give them some verbal points. Most individuals do not have very good verbal recall. they can't act very well on instructions that are only in a verbal form. So written is desperately needed. It was expensive in a paper-based system. It is not expensive in an electronic-based system. So that's this change that's happening right now. As systems get used to the fact that the whole world is changing around them, what was once expensive is no longer, and something else is what's causing, a lot of money to get sucked out of the system. So having patients be on board within their care becomes very, very important as we go deeper into the future of medicine.
So again, Kaiser's a great partner of yours. What other providers and vendors have you seen really step up and attempt to put patients at the center of their workflows and their processes?
Well, my personal favorite, and I've actually reached out to them again, they're going to come to Cinderblocks, was my Lifetime Health Diary that was originally out of New Zealand.
Okay.
And now they're calling themselves My Diary, and they're in a new form. But what I loved about them was they get the fact a whole bunch of people are visual. The beginning of their form was a template of the human body with hot spots that you could click on and go into that episode of care or that concern. And then it was done on a graphic timeline. So a lot of people understand, even if you have limited education, how a timeline works. Whereas they don't always understand the way a lot of portals are set up. So I'm really fond of them because it's a visual, interactive, dynamic portal that patients can understand. It wasn't so provider-centric.
Okay.
So that's one of my favorites. I've gone to Cerner several times, and I've been happy with how well they listen to what we have to say, and they do make changes. That is always exciting to see. Cerner's had me speak very candidly many times at their organization, and I always love companies that are willing to hear the hard stuff, and they're willing to put somebody who self-describes as an activist on their stage. That's a brave thing to do. But I've also, talked with, there's a lot of vendor companies that are working really hard. There's MedSeek, there's Merge, there's Athena Health. There's a lot of folks who want to make this happen, and there's passionate people at the helm. And almost everyone that I speak to that's one of those passionate people has had something happen to them personally. Or to a loved one. And that's the reason they have this energy behind them, that they refuse to sit still and they will change things.
So it would be remiss of me not to mention your new book. You're a newly published author. You've just released a memoir called The Writing on the Wall. I'd love to know what prompted you to write the book now.
I wondered about that. So I was really frantic back in January and February to write that book. I've been working on it off and on for years, but I had this energy to get it done, get it done, get it done. And when I feel that kind of energy, I act on it. I found it's always a good idea to do that. And then CMS did what they did. So, the timing is perfect to make sure people understand this isn't about workflow. This isn't about, time saving and cost. This is about a different kind of cost, which is people's lives.
Right.
When you make information inaccessible to a family, you are causing people harm. You are hurting people, and sometimes you're costing lives. So I wanted in this book, in a very clear case, make people understand that to deny people access to information in a medical setting is a kind of abuse. And we are in a country where abuse is not tolerated. So that's what I'm trying to do with the book.
So how did the writing process compare to the painting process in terms of creative juices flowing and meeting deadlines and things like that?
It's very similar. I paint with words just as much as I paint with brushes. I tend to have a lyrical flowing style in my writing. It's somewhat, at times, a little bit antiquated because I read a lot of British authors, so a lot of the words I choose are words like whilst and shall, and but that's me, and I wanted to make my voice come out within the book, and I think I succeeded at that. As far as working really hard, I had whooping cough throughout the winter. So
I remember talking about that.
I was pretty miserable, and I needed to stay still and not do as much as I normally do, and writing the book also was helpful to keep me still. So there's the positive side of disease.
Okay. So you're young to be publishing a memoir. Do you think this could be the first in a series, or do you have another book in your book?
Sort of saying that one story is over and a new story is beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So this memoir is the beginning. It is not the end. But I needed to get this story out. I needed people to really understand the depth of passion that is behind what I do.
Mm-hmm.
That yes, there's a walking gallery, and yes, there's paintings I do, but the spark that's behind those things is a powerful and mighty spark. Mm-hmm. And I wanted people to relate to it and understand how desperately painful the experience my husband and I, Fred and I, went through. Mm-hmm. And I compared it to my childhood abuse because it's just as bad. And if I could, a lot more people have experienced abuse in a domestic setting than have necessarily gone to hospitals. Mm-hmm. So I thought, if you can relate to what I'm saying happened to me as a child, then you can relate that experience to what happens to patients in many facilities in this country. Mm-hmm. And if you can make that jump, that emotional jump, I can't see a world where you won't be part of the movement. You will feel that you must be part of the movement because you've got to make this better.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's exciting. I can't wait to read it. I know Mr. H and Lori have read it and given it glowing reviews. So you can find it on Amazon, and from what I understand, there's a Kindle version in the works.
Yes, we're working on the Kindle version right now. This is my first self-published book, so I'm learning the entire process as it goes.
Right. Right. So to wrap up, let's talk a little bit more about the walking gallery, because I know that's how a lot of the HIStalk readers know you. What's next in terms of moving that forward? How do you see this for artistic movement impacting healthcare IT even more than it already has?
Wow. Okay, so more and more people keep joining the walking gallery. It's very, very exciting. Each year we go to HIMSS, there's more of us. Mm-hmm. I think we had between 35 and 40 at this last HIMSS. And, of course, it shot up through the Twitter mentions throughout the entire time. I mean, it's been amazing. The last 3 HIMSS I haven't really spoken at, yet the walking galleries usually in the top 10 Twitter mentions for a conference of like 40,000 attendees.
Oh, wow.
That is how powerful 35 images are. Mm-hmm. Isn't that amazing?
That's
and
great.
More and more people are becoming comfortable with the idea that transparency changes everything. So I'm getting more leaders, more individuals who work for companies becoming willing to share their personal life, their personal story, their spark of why they're doing what they do. And it's powerful and it's amazing. And when people tell their story with that visual support, they make folks understand, but also they find like-minded individuals. Like I use the term self-selecting strange, right? So anybody who comes up to me to talk to me when they see what I do, they've already made the choice that they're going to do a strange thing, right? You don't waste your time with folks who are never going to go out there or do anything unusual. You talk with people who are spectacular.
Well, great. So real quick, how can somebody become a member?
You can join the walking gallery by having an email, a tweet, a Facebook message, a LinkedIn message sent to me.
Okay. Great. Well, that's all the questions we have. Well, I have for you today. Lori might have some questions from the audience. Thanks, Regina.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Now we'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. As a reminder, please use the questions section on the GoToWebinar panel to submit your questions to Regina. We don't actually have any queued up, so we'll give it a second. I felt like what you discussed was very thorough and the questions were very diverse, so we may not get any new questions. No, it doesn't look like it. So with that, we'll conclude the webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Regina and Jen, for an interesting interview and a fun discussion. Attendees, watch your email for links to the recording of today's webinar, as well as the PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation. We look forward to seeing you at our next HIStalk webinar.